All right, so welcome to what we're hoping is the first of many discussions with local business owners to talk about how COVID affected them, some of the lessons they learned, the challenges they overcame. Our first one today is going to be with Blake Jackson, the owner of Whisk. He's also a caterer and an amazing chef and a food prize winner. So Blake is generously willing to spend some time with us and give us insights. Again, I'm Douglas White, the director for the Center for Business Economic Research here at LSUS. And again, before we start, I always like to stress that any opinions offered here are mine and not the university's. So with that said, let's start. First, Blake, I'd like to give you a chance to talk about yourself, introduce yourself, tell us about Whisk and any other kind of, I know you also have the event space down on Texas Street, talk a little bit about your business and then we'll get into how COVID affected it.
Cool. Well, thanks, Doug, for having me, man. I'm Blake Jackson. I'm the executive chef and owner, Whisk Dessert Bar and Drake Catering, and managing partner currently at 421 Texas. I've been in the food business about 12 years now. I'd actually gone to school for political science and foreign policy, so you can see how that easily transitioned into food. But other than that, started Drake Catering 2011. We did a lot of event services, added the Drake Valet parking, and opened Whisk in 2017. There was a couple other businesses in between there. I'm as much a serial entrepreneur as a chef. Yeah, I get a thrill out of opening new businesses. It's fun for me and to dream up the concepts. And as with anybody that opens up multiple businesses, some are winners and some are losers, and you just kind of take it on the chin and learn a lesson and move on.
All right, so I'm gonna guess that in all your food experience and classroom experience, whatnot, that you talked about all sorts of things like, what happens if the oven breaks? What happens if a supplier fails to deliver goods? Probably never came up with what happens if the government orders me to shut down or there's a pandemic so that people can't come to your business. So I thought this would be interesting to talk a little bit about we'll get into the lessons you learned and how it's changed your business, but let's start with here in Louisiana, our first COVID case was reported on March 9th. I think that was down in New Orleans. The first case reported here in the Caddo-Bossier area was on March 11th, and then we had the shutdown on March 23rd. So before we get to the shutdown, there was that kind of 2 weeks before the shutdown where it's like, oh, what's going on? We don't know. We hear New Orleans was hit pretty hard. We heard the stories coming out of there. Then it started to show up here. Did you notice, running your business, any change before we had the shutdown? Like, did people stop coming in? Did business slow down? Were people, before we knew that, it's mainly airborne, that were people worried about buying, getting, pre-prepared food or desserts that, maybe that it's going to be transmitted that way? Did you notice any kind of effect on your business before we actually got to the shutdown?
Yeah, I'd say that the main thing was kind of, there's all the calls for, hey, are we a go on these events or not? Hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the cake or not. I know I've got a deposit for this wedding cake, but we're not sure if we're going to throw it. And then on the catering side, obviously we had a lot of people concerned about, okay, are we going to do this event? Or are they telling y'all any new precautions you need to take in doing this? And I really remember the first time somebody walked in the store with a mask, and I was like, my initial reaction was like, oh man, like that's so much overkill. Just being blunt, like I was just like, wow, that's extreme. And little did I know, like a month later, that would be the new norm. It was just someone that was already ahead of the curve. Then they come to find out, that's a good client. I had talked to them, and they had that they were very prepared. They had bought all of the N95 masks. They had gloves. They were like stocked and ready to go. And although at the time it seemed extreme, there was like, man, y'all are really ahead of the curve for sure.
All right, so then I'm going to ask about, we get the shutdown order on March 23rd. If your experience was anything like ours here at the university, there was, we had started talking about, wow, this is getting serious. And, there was no like real message from the top, but talking amongst ourselves, it was kind of expected that I think we're going to have classes moving off campus, because it had happened at other
Right.
universities in different states. And basically, we came in on, I believe it was St. Patty's Day, and had a department meeting. And it was like, oh, by the way, you're supposed to be out of your office by noon today. And,
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's pretty similar for, we at least had a department meeting as a business owner. I mean, you pretty much found out that the governor came out and said, we're shutting everything down for what originally was supposed to be 2 weeks,
Right.
How do you react as a business owner to all of a sudden be told, hey, you can't run your business?
Yeah, there was a lot of logistics there that made things really difficult. The first one being is that we're predominantly fresh shop. I mean, I have very few things in the freezers. So I was left with a lot of product. We try to be a week in advance, with our orders. And so when we're getting things in, we're prepping for several days down the line. And I ended up stuck with a lot of product because our initial reaction was to completely shut down. We technically, you could do curbside stuff. I mean, but the initial reaction is there's so much panic. It was just like, I guess we're not in business for a little bit, and we'll just deal with the outcome here later. So that first week, we kind of just really put the brakes on everything, and then you start to look at the finances of having a week of business that you paid to operate but weren't actually open, and you quickly realize that runway is very small, especially in the food business. If any of y'all have been in the food business, we're not known for that 6-month cushion of capital in case things go awry. We burn it and turn it, if you will. So that's kind of that was definitely a shocking revelation. And then it came down to, okay, let's talk with staff. Let's talk with who's as we looked at essential businesses, I had to come to a decision of who is essential employee. We really did try to keep everyone with at least some hours. And so they at least had something going on. This was kind of before there was too much information out about unemployment and what those benefits were going to be. And also, I mean, I was afraid from my standpoint. I remember I called our state rep, about the point system with unemployment. It's like, hey, is my factor going to go up now because I have to let people go on unemployment because I have to lay them off right now? And so there was a lot of concern with that on my end too. You don't want to end up having to pay tons and tons of unemployment insurance because of the replications of a statewide mandate and virtually national mandate at that point.
You brought up the interesting point about, that you had basically a week of product on hand, very, perishable product.
Mm-hmm.
So that raises the question that, okay, so if the shutdown was really only 2 weeks and you shut down for 2 weeks, how difficult would it be for you to like, all right, we're going to reopen, to be able to go out and reopen? Not only do you have to like get that product again, but I assume now you probably need to buy at least not just enough product to go for a week, but maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks so that you have, you have that backup. So, and then again, with the uncertainty that, oh, what if happens if we open and then we have to shut it all back down, say a week later or
Right.
10 days later, how does that factor in? How does that make it difficult? It's not an office setting where we can turn on the computers and fire up the programs. You're talking about, you got to stock and buy perishable goods.
Right. Yeah. When we're down for 48 hours, just as a thing, it's just like when we close on Sunday, Monday, and we're open back on Tuesday, it takes us a full day to really get restocked. When we're down for a week, I mean, it takes another 2 days because that's just that much prep. There's a lot of things that can be partially done and finished off, but it's over a week, then you can't do that at all. So it's fully scratch. And unfortunately, in the world of scratch baking or any business that's doing everything from scratch, it's a very involved process. It's a lot of labor. And so, yeah, it was tough. I honestly, you know, after that first week, I did not know how everything was going to play out. And that, again, it was on my dime at that time. There was all the talk on Capitol Hill about what they were going to be doing, but there was no actual solution yet. PPP wasn't really formula. It was coming together, but no one knew what that was going to look like, or if it was going to be a grant or a loan. I mean, there was a lot of questions, and so that first week was really stressful.
All right, you mentioned staff, trying to keep your staff employed, obligation to people who worked with you. So I guess the question I have is, do you reach the point where it's like, I can't give you enough hours, that it's gonna be better to lay you off so you can get the unemployment benefits, but at the same time, I'm sure you have staff that you've trained over the time you've been open that you really don't want to lose, and you're worried if you put them on unemployment or lay them off that maybe they don't come back, and that's going to hurt you in the future when you reopen. How do you try and how do you balance the obligation to your staff and to your business between trying to do what's best for everyone?
Yeah, it was a tough call, and ultimately what it came down to is that we had to take our more senior staff that had more experience, that had more training, and we had to make sure that they were a priority on the hour list, and then we just kind of trimmed our way down. And we did have some younger staff that we told them that it was probably in their best interest to not take hours and to file for unemployment, because it was going to be impossible on our end to really to make that work for them. We didn't have, a lot of that younger staff works in the retail side up front. They're not on the production side. And so they really weren't needed.
Right.
I think that first week I kind of had everyone come in and clean and just kind of have the place ready for whenever things were going to be back to normal. But on the whole, it ended up being kind of within that week, I was like, guys, I don't think there's really it's not a good decision for y'all to be here for me or for you. And so we did have to let a few go after the first week.
All right, so once we got past the initial shutdown, we started having phased reopenings. How did that affect you? You're preparing food, you're a bakery, dessert bar. So it's not quite the same as a restaurant where, you can only have 25% or you can only have outdoor seating, as we phase those different rules in. Did the phasing, did those rules affect you? Or since you're more people come in, get their cookies and their cakes and do you still do the Whiskets? I used to love the Whiskets. that they come in, get those and go. Was that kind of not as important to you as it would be to some of the other businesses around?
Yeah, we did, unfortunately, we did have to cut breakfast, and it hasn't come back because of our staffing. That was a bummer of all this, but we kind of skipped any sort of indoor. We felt that the trend, not just that eventually it was going to be a curbside only situation. So we went straight to curbside. We kind of saw that nationally. That's where it was. And I mean, it wasn't getting better at the time. Our numbers weren't getting better. So now, we made that decision to go curbside only from the get-go. We had people still walking up to the door, and, we had signage all over the door, and, there was still resistance at that point in time. People were like, "Oh, this is made up." It's, like, look at the flu, I think there was some validity in the early on, because there's a lot of unknowns of like, what actually is this? What are we facing? But ultimately, we just felt that it was the right thing to do, to go ahead and do curbside only. And it definitely was a hit. I mean, we are not, I think also the people weren't certain of their own finances. You had some tucking away of money, and I'm a luxury good, and we know that. I mean, this is not something, you don't have to have one of our Tigre almond days to live. I mean, you should.
Right.
You should have one for the sake of enjoying life, but it's not a necessity. And we knew that. It was tough.
All right, so you mentioned the uncertainty, and I think that, especially during the first, say, 4 months of this, the uncertainty was overwhelming from, how's it spread? How, like, if I get it, is it the 1918 flu, or is it
Right.
just really, or is it just the flu, as some people said. So obviously all this hindsight, looking at the uncertainty, let's talk a little bit about the government help or lack of. How do you feel that the government, let's talk a little bit about the state and the local. How do you feel the government did with helping businesses like you get through this uncertainty? And do they do anything, or did they do a good job of maybe reducing any of that uncertainty?
Ultimately, whatever side of the fence you sit on, Louisiana's response was, overall comparable to other states. It was successful. I mean, I think that our numbers prove that we were able to contain based on policy. Did I like it? No. Did I always agree with everything that they decided to do? No. But in hindsight, I think I can look back and say that we had a decent response. At the time, I thought it was overreaching. I thought that it was, you know, I'm a team player as far as community and national spirit go, and I was willing to do what it took to, if they felt that was in the best interest of people. But ultimately, I mean, I was really concerned that that this was going to put me out of business. The state had it was, I feel like, on the state and local level, rocky start on communication. But that improved over time. And really, I think we're fortunate. We had some people in our community that were very good about helping to relay that information. I know, like my state rep over here, Thomas Presley, he did a great job of making sure that all of us had that information, and he got it into the hands of small business leaders so that we could get it to other people. Grant Knuckles, another person, owner of Twisted Root, very good about making sure that that information got out to everybody. And if it weren't for the part of some private citizens stepping up and making sure they disseminated that info, I don't know if we would have gotten it. So overall, it was overreaching at first, but ultimately, hindsight, it's what needed to happen.
All right, let's talk briefly then about the financial help that maybe came or maybe didn't come from the federal government when we passed the first small business relief efforts. Did you find that to be useful? Did it help you, or because there were the stories about how this is aimed to help small businesses, but then we read stories about how corporations like the Ruth Chris Steakhouse got so much of this money. Do you feel like the first attempt at passing help to small businesses, was that successful? Did it actually make it to small businesses? Were you able to take advantage of it?
Eventually, yes. The first launch of PPP and EIDL through the SBA was it was obviously not very well laid out to help those that it was intended to help. And I don't know if that was by accident, or I'm a long time skeptic of why things happen in Washington. So I have my own thoughts there. But either way, it was clear that there was a lot of very large and very financially healthy companies that were first in line. There was also a lot of concern that larger national banks were getting a bigger share of that pie, and that they were able to fast track their customers faster than the smaller banks. The optics were terrible. If from a from an outsider's perspective, I mean, it looked really bad. We eventually were awarded both of those, the EIDL and the PPP. And yeah, that was integral in keeping us operate. That paid salaries, and that's what it went to. It paid salaries and rent. It's not glamorous, but then again, that gave us the capital to cover losses and the capital to move forward on other projects that could make us more efficient during a shutdown. And so that's how Pen Pals was born.
And that's a great segue, because I was just about to ask, out of all crisis comes opportunities, and businesses had to adapt and innovate. And I know you did a great job, that you actually even won an award for your innovation here with your Pen Pals package.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about Pen Pals, how you came up with the idea. Do you think you ever would have done something like this if it hadn't been for the shutdown and needing to find revenue, needing to find a way to keep your staff busy, to keep yourself busy?
Yeah. So Pen Pals was a program, and we sit and we talk about ideas, and I've got notebooks full of ideas that never actually came to fruition. And no, I don't think this one would have come to fruition if it weren't for the situation we were put in. But Pen Pals was this concept of, fresh made treats delivered with a customized note from one person to another. And what was so clutch about that at the time is that tons of people were shut in. I mean, not just older folks either. You had in more metropolitan areas, you had folks that were literally shut in for extended periods of time. I mean, months. So it was the right product for the right time. And not only did it keep us busy, I mean, we had some of our best recorded months. April and May of 2020 were some of our best recorded months that we've ever had as a business, which is just incredible. And all of it was attributed to online sales. So, I think that always being prepared for things that might happen, even if you don't know you're preparing for them. It's good to have those brainstorm sessions where you come up with those concepts that may not be an everyday concept, but it's there when you need it. And we're excited that we learned a lot through that process. It was rocky. It was ugly. It was not, it was definitely not without hiccups, because we had never done e-commerce before in that fashion. So we learned a lot about that. And now this summer we'll be relaunching kind of a redesigned e-commerce with the lessons that we had learned from 2020.
So I will tell you, I sent Pen Pals to my brother and my parents, and both of them loved it, raved about the cookies.
Nice, thank you.
My brother's kids, he said almost truly, he's like, yeah, I had to hide the last cookie so that my wife and I actually got to eat some, because the kids loved them so much. Are you still doing Pen Pals? Is that been retired since we're slowly getting back more towards normal?
It did retire when we opened back up the storefront, and we took on a wholesale client. Being that we had trimmed down our staffing, we had to pretty much shift staff to where the money was coming in from.
Right.
And so unfortunately, it also kind of had to take a back burner for right now. We still have folks that call and ask us to custom do those, and we certainly entertain those whenever we have the manpower to do it. But ultimately, we'll be retooling that whole program in the next few months and kind of bringing it back, because we do feel like it's e-commerce is certainly not going away. And I think that to be on the front end of that is going to be important for us 10 years from now, because we'll have the experience and have had the know-how for a long time on how to run an effective e-commerce business.
So also talking about the Pen Pals, one of the reasons I thought it was great is I'm stuck in my house with quarantine, and working from home, it's like, wow, I'm thinking about people like you and other friends I have running small businesses. And it's like, how do I support you guys? Like, what can I do to try and show my friends that's like, I know you're
Right.
struggling. I want to keep your business here. I think it adds a great value to our community. Then you came up with Pen Pals. It's like, sweet, I'm gonna send my brother, I'm gonna send my parents, as a
For
way
sure.
for me to try and show community support. Since you said you had the biggest month, in April and May doing that, how much do you think that was community support reaching out, and what's it mean to a business like you to have that community support trying to rally around and keep you here?
Yeah. Oh, that the first month, I mean, it was entirely community support. And yeah, it's an incredible feeling knowing that that we have that type of support here. I mean, Shreveport is not always known for being the most outgoing and supportive of their small businesses, and 2020 proved us wrong. I mean, it was really great. It was heartwarming. It was enough to get back up, and you know what, like, hey, we're gonna fight for this. And I appreciate you and all the folks that supported us and supported all the small businesses, because it was the energy we needed to keep up the fight, because that's what it was. I mean, I think if you don't consider it a struggle and a fight to stay alive, then you weren't as invested in it as you think you are.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about maybe pivots or changes that you were forced to make in your business that you think might make you stronger going forward, that
Sure.
things you know things you maybe were struggling with that you maybe would have tried to make work, but now you realize, oh, in hindsight, that was good to maybe kill this and make me move into a different direction, or to change
Yeah.
something I'm doing.
For sure. Our first thing is staffing. We have a much smaller staff, but they're a better paid staff and they're more committed staff. That is what it is. That's the number one lesson I learned from this, is that I'd much rather run a small business with people that feel like they have a stake in operating my business with me, than a large staff of folks that are making lower wages that may not be as invested. Now, not to get on tangent, but I think it should be my decision to have that business model, but that's neither here nor there. Also, I think that I learned that products are, especially in my type of business where we make a scratch-made product, that everything feels like you love it. It's not always about that to run a successful business. Some things, even though I want them to work, this was a good opportunity for me to reevaluate. Like, you know what? These things don't work. They gotta go. They're taking up shelf space. They take up labor. They take up ingredient cost. They aren't making us money. It's not in our best interest to just keep trying to make it work. Sometimes you just have to let things go.
All right. Slightly changing gears here, talking about I don't know if it's correct to call it your side business, but you also do catering.
Mhm.
How was that affected by the quarantine and the pandemic? Did you feel, I mean, obviously it probably went down, but did you, as things, I don't want to say, I guess, loosened up, did you find that maybe people wanted to have smaller get-togethers or
Yeah,
things
there
in their
was
backyard?
definitely right. Further into things, yes. I mean, on the whole, for 2020, on the catering side, we were down 70%. And that is because now that's 70% of gross revenue. Now, I say that because on the whole, it might have been a healthier business last year, because I didn't retain any staffing for catering, because it was just a total shutdown. I mean, we had no big weddings. We weren't, so in a industry where we were used to writing invoices that were for 10,000, we had invoices that were for 1,000. And obviously that requires a lot less manpower to do. So I don't know if it was the worst thing for us on the catering front. I started a bond system somewhere around April, where I sold bonds that were redeemable for 90 days from the time of purchase. So if you bought a $750 dinner bond, it was worth $1,000 in dinner, but you couldn't redeem it for 3 months, and that was incredible. We actually sold so many of those. I was very impressed, but at the same time, one thing about bonds, you have to realize they do get redeemed, and so you have to be prepared for. You do have to be prepared for
Right.
that. But it was the capital I needed at the time to keep pushing forward and on that side of the business, and so that was a necessity. Um, Overall, I mean, yeah, we shrunk. We went from doing 200 person to 10 person, and ultimately, I think I like it more. I learned that about myself, as I actually like the interaction better. So, maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all for that company.
All right, so being an economist, I have to ask about the tea leaves. So with your catering or also with the business, do you see people booking more events in the future? Like, are we actually getting back to normal? Or do you see, is your business telling you that people are starting to open up, and we've got the vaccine, and we're
Yeah,
hopefully getting towards herd immunity? Do you feel like does the future of your business kind of give any hints that maybe we're rounding the corner?
absolutely. I mean, it's definitely there now. I'm anxious to, or I'm just curious to find out if other people that really had to change their model, are they going to change their models back? Because I don't know if I'm going to be one of those. I've found myself uh, solidly booking a lot of these smaller dinners. It's more fun for me. I enjoy it more, and it's given me a better quality of life, because a wedding, I might get home at 1 or 2 in the morning if it takes that long to pack up and clean up, if it's a big ordeal. And, for not a whole lot different of a profit margin, I can do a private dinner for 10 and I'm home by 10:30. So I found myself honestly booked out further with private dinners than with big weddings. And I don't know how much I'm going to shift back into those larger, those larger catered events.
All right, so I guess then the last few questions I have is, you've already kind of mentioned this. I was going to ask about personal lessons you learned. Obviously, one, that you like the smaller events better. I think even if you didn't quite say it exactly, obviously you found, I don't want to say you refound your love of doing this, but you obviously realized that this is something you enjoy, or you wouldn't fight
Yeah.
as hard as you did
For sure.
to keep it going. So no, I guess, what kind of personal growth or lessons did you learn about yourself as a businessman, and or anything else that you feel like that running a business during a pandemic has taught you?
Sure. I mean, I learned honestly that I was not a very good business person. That's honestly the biggest lesson I learned. And it was good. It was a healthy dose of reality for me to really evaluate my business, not based on accolades and praise, but on dollars and cents. And I mean, we all want to make money, and no, who doesn't? But at the same time, I think you can get hung up as an entrepreneur. And it's like when everyone's patting you on the back, they're like, "Oh, it's so awesome, so great you're doing that." That you're like, "Oh, great, I must be doing something right." And you can have a wonderful product, but if it's not making you money, you can't do it forever, because that's the whole point of operating a business, and it's very hard to grow if you don't do that. So I had a lot of big lessons in learning how to be a better business person and a more efficient business person, but also, maintain that it's people that run this business with me. And that's what the real bottom line is for me, is taking care of those that help me make this a reality, because I couldn't do it without them. I mean, 100% couldn't do it without them. I mean, they're not replaceable commodities, like flour and sugar would be. So
Okay.
that's what I really learned the most.
All right, before we finish this, is there anything else that you'd want to bring up or that you'd want to talk about, to let people know about? And before you answer that, we will talk about your business when we finish to give you, a chance to promote it again. But just, is there anything else you want to add that you feel like people should know about the pandemic or running a business through a pandemic?
Yeah, it really, it's just, you've got to take a serious look at what works best for your business and what are you actually good at, and focus on those things. Focus on what you actually are the best at and use that to your advantage, because that's what's going to get you through. I think we spent a long time throwing stuff on the wall, seeing if it stuck. If it stuck, we would squeeze what we could out of it and moving on. And that's not a good model. So stick with what you're best at.
All right, well, I guess we'll then kind of wrap this up. But before we do that, I know you have a big event coming up in 2 weeks. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the event coming up, the running of the hogs, and be sure to mention how people can find it and get tickets to the event, and tell us anything else you want to tell us about Whisk. What's in the cookie case right now and what they should come get.
Right on. So Running of the Hogs, May 16th from 1 to 7. It's a Sunday. We're going to be closing off the street here on Azalea Drive. I'm teamed up with Kyle Bodwin, the owner of Ellie and Chalk, the men's store. That's my business mate over here at 724 Azalea. And Matt Snyder from Pinpoint Events, who's done a lot of great events in town like Derby Day and Crawfest. And so we're kind of got this funky little thing that we've wanted to do for a long time. We've got bands coming in. We're shutting down the street. We're selling a lot of different awesome foods. I'm part of a team called Pork City Barbecue. We're a Hogs for the Cause team. Hogs for the Cause is one of the largest fundraisers for families with pediatric brain cancer. So all proceeds from the food will go to the Hogs for the Cause organization, which is just really what kind of spurred this whole thing on. Is from the food. If you're a foodie, I'm doing a smoked pork paella. I've got another chef from Baton Rouge is doing a Thai green curry boudin. We're just gonna have some epic eats for sure. I don't get involved with anything unless the food's really good. And then here at Whisk, we're just rocking and rolling. Our cookie pies are flying off the shelves. If you haven't seen those, come check them out. We got great cheesecakes, plated desserts, cookies, gelato. We're just rocking and rolling.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us this morning. And if I don't get in for a gelato or a cookie soon, I definitely hope to see you at Running of the Hogs in 2 weeks. And thanks for your time, Blake. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
You too.